Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged podcast. And this is so special and so much fun and so nice. We're in Imogen's kitchen. Imogen, what a lovely kitchen.
Oh, thank you very much.
And Jack's here.
Hello. Hell of a kitchen, Imogen. Very, very nice. Great coffee.
Top coffee.
I'm a fan of your elderly dog.
Oh.
Yeah, you may hear the dog tippy tapping around on the floor. She's lovely.
She's currently on her little memory phone.
She's in her bed.
Situation.
She's in a special memory foam bed, so that's good. That's very good.
But yeah, she is quite tippy tappy and also super old. She's 14, but glorious. Look at her little face.
Very alert as well. She doesn't. Yeah, it took a while for her to get friendly with me. She had to do a lot of finger sniffing.
Yeah, you know, she's a good guard dog. And actually, we took a. This is extremely boring, but she did 10 miles on Saturday.
Ooh.
She wasn't a massive fan of that.
No.
But she did do it. So, 14, but going strong.
That's very, very impressive. But anyway, what we're going to do is a leisurely rundown of the news and what we've been up to. Because the weird thing is, if you just watch the show, you would think, oh, well, they're all talking to each other and they're with each other all the time and then they do these. No, because we've worked it out. I must have seen you since Vancouver.
I haven't seen Imogen since Vancouver.
Yeah.
I feel like I did see
Yeah,
you.
we might have seen each other somewhere.
Oh, what did we film together? Was Waverley after? I don't know.
No.
Waverley was before, wasn't
that
it?
was
Was that
before.
before Vancouver? Yes, it was. Yeah. So Waverley was. So in fact, Vancouver.
Which go and watch that episode if you haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it.
Performing very well. It's a very enjoyable episode.
Yeah.
One of my recent favourites, Robert.
I think it was great fun, wasn't it? And it looks beautiful. And thankfully, it was nice weather. And thankfully, the brakes worked well enough so that we're still here.
Yes, for context, this is the 122-year-old electric car that you and I drove, and reviewed a few weeks ago, which was a surreal experience.
It is extraordinary. And with a 122-year-old electric motor that hasn't been touched and still works. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
But they all just end up in landfill, don't they?
Yeah, they just
work.
thrown away. After 122 years, people just throw them away.
But it is, aside from obviously being an impressive piece of technology that's lasted 122 years, it's a very wholesome episide.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I'd say that's like peak Fully Charged. Really, really delightful.
That's very nice. Oh, that's good to know. But then since then, I know the one you've just done is the Citroen EC3.
Also doing very well.
Which is doing very well, but
Yeah.
it's also really, I think, one of those pivotal. So you can sort of say, oh, Nissan Leaf, first mass production made only, Renault Zoe, you can put the Tesla Model S. I think this is going to be in that grand category of, this one was where stuff changed. It's because it's European built, but cheap.
Yeah, so just to kind of set the table a bit, I've been on a strict Stellantis diet these last few months, which sounds like an actual diet.
It is.
It does sound like an actual diet. Where
I've lost 15 kilograms since I've been on the Stellantis
only
diet.
uncooked pasta. But I've been driving an awful lot of small Stellantis group electric vehicles because they've released a bunch. So we had the new Fiat 600, we had the new Jeep Avenger, not Stellantis, but I've also driven the Volvo EX30 recently. Just a lot of small crossover-y stuff.
Yeah.
And they've all pretty much been impressive in their own way. They've all had prices starting with a 30 and usually in the low 30s. But then out of nowhere, we've got this Citroen EC3 with a starting price in Europe of 23,300 euros. And it seems that the Stellantis group has said to Citroen, right, you go after Dacia. You target the very bottom of the market. They may even be selling the thing at a loss just to kind of corner that really, really entry-level EV niche.
Right.
But you and I both know every video that we post on YouTube, a good chunk of the comments is people going, yeah, all well and good, where are the cheap ones?
Yeah.
And we feel the same way.
Yeah.
No one's more frustrated about the lack of them than us. So this really feels like a landmark moment. 23,300 euro electric car. It's quite interesting looking. The screen in the middle, optional extra. I love that. You can just have it with a phone holder.
The phone holder thing is not that bad. That's the VW Up had that.
Yeah.
Had just a clip, and it took a while because if that one does the same, you could have the software of the car linked to it.
That's exactly right.
Right, and it was frustrating with Volkswagen because it did eventually work on the day that I took it back, and I couldn't get it to work before that. But I struggled. But once it did, then I would never need a screen that did everything. It told you what your range was, speed, blah, blah, but then you also had your sat nav and everything else. Phones are brilliant, and they update and they don't go out of all that stuff.
100%. So that's a really exciting little car, and that to me really feels like we've taken a huge step in the right direction. Like the the dawn of the era of actually cheap electric cars. I can stop saying things like relatively affordable in videos, referring to a car that costs 34 grand, which makes me feel a bit queasy. But of course, up until now, that has been relatively cheap for an electric car. Yeah. So that's quite exciting.
I mean, I did, because I was thinking about that. I was in London yesterday, and I was walking down a street in London, and there were so many huge, generally European-built, either SUVs or big saloon cars parked on that street. Each of them at starting price £70,000, and there were hundreds of them. Okay, that's London. It was West London. It's all that stuff. But people buy expensive cars. There's millions. There's 30 million of them on the road. And then you go, oh, why aren't they cheap? Well, I don't know. Yeah, they're cheaper than they were, and they're getting cheaper. But cars are weird.
Cars are weird, and I think especially how so many people opt to lease now as well.
Yeah.
So whilst it may have a price tag in a particular bracket, you don't necessarily connect to that price bracket, and it's sort of what you're paying monthly. And what's going to be so interesting about the new Citroen is that actually, what does that translate to as a monthly
lease?
cost?
Oh, yeah, it's got to be pretty low.
That would be so nice and so compelling.
Yeah.
I think that's where it gets, that much more accessible as well.
Yeah,
most definitely.
But then, okay, so there's the other bit of. I think this is relevant to what we're talking about today because of the cost. So I did a talk at the Winchester Skeptics Society on Wednesday night, What
is the Skeptics Society?
Well, the Skeptics Society is a group of people, it's all over the country. It's basically fairly nerdy, sciencey people who like scientific facts. So because when I first heard it, I went, oh, are they going to be, flat earthers?
Contrarians.
They probably are a bit contrarian, but they're contrarian in a really lovely, friendly, non-aggressive way.
They're grounded in actual science.
They actually quite like actual science and peer-reviewed science. They understand that. Quite a lot of them are scientists and engineers. That's it's that grouping. They're a fascinating group. And I spoke at this same group in 2013, so 10 years ago. Well, for a start with Fully Charged show, we had 1,000, I couldn't believe this, 1,800 subscribers.
1,800 subscribers.
In 2013.
You'd been going for like 2 years then.
I know, that's how slow it was. Because I thought it must have been like 10,000. No, I can't quite believe that's right, but I think that was right. But anyway, now we've got 1,339,000, I think. We'd just come up to
something like that, yeah.
But then what was also interesting, I'm trying to stay... so there was 130,000 pure electric cars in the world, 130,000, of which... this is in 2013.
Okay.
And 3,700 in the UK. So there were 3,700 electric cars in the UK in 2013, which that sounds plausible. Now there's 100 million electric cars estimated on the roads of the world, and there is 1,450,000 in the UK, but I think that figure includes plug-in hybrids.
Ooh.
I think it's just coming up to 1 million pure electric. So,
but that's nuts.
But it is quite a big change.
And especially if you start to think about how those are manufactured, what kind of sort of cultural shift that also represents. Yeah. That is a huge number. Huge.
The other one, which I really liked, cost of making 1 kilowatt hour of batteries in 2013 was $750. It's now $98.19. So that is a fairly substantial drop, and this relates to what you've just seen with the Citroen. That battery reduction cost isn't reflected in our cars yet, but it's starting to be. Because they can actually buy. I don't know what the size of battery was. It 40 kilowatts,
40 kilowatts, give or take, kilowatt hours. Which is smaller than its Stellantis brethren. Yes. But because it's quite small and light, I think that'll probably still do you 160 plus miles of range. If you can go over 150, for me, less than 150 miles, and you go, kind of annoying. Agree.
Anything more than 150 miles, I don't even think about it, because that's 3 hours driving on a motorway.
On that particular car, there's some other really creative things, I think, that have gone into getting that price down. So there is the simplicity of it, the fact that the infotainment screen is an optional extra.
Yeah.
There's the fact that it's got a relatively sized battery, but then you'll recall we covered the Citroen Ollie concept earlier this year, and there's a lot of the learnings from that seem to have gone into this in terms of simplifying production, making the car out of less pieces,
bits,
because then it's less expensive to manufacture the sort of parts that amount to the car, and you can also build the cars quicker. So they're saying this new C3, they roll off the line 20% faster than the old ones.
Right.
So there's brands are getting really creative.
But 20%, I mean, that's not just like a little bit of an improvement. That's a massive step change. And I mean, it also emphasizes the value of producing those concepts, right, as well. That they're not just fun. You're getting something
You're learning from it as a manufacturer. Yeah.
Oftentimes,
Yeah.
People get a bit cross when we cover concepts on the channel. A lot of the times people are like, this is never going to happen. It's like, well, no, it's not going to have 8 doors that all open downwards. Of course not. But when you know what to sift through and what to pay attention to with concept cars, there are often really interesting clues as to the future direction of a brand. And that Ollie was a really insightful.
I just quickly want to do one more thing from my talk.
Go on.
It was right. People liked it. It was a very popular talk.
But by any chance, the most popular talk?
It may have had quite a large audience. I don't want to milk the fact.
Did it have a larger audience than a certain? Who might it have?
The one person told me that. I don't. But then that talk from that certain person, who I'm not going to, because he's amazing, was very shortly after the first kind of COVID lockdowns, and so there were many fewer people attending the live events.
You know, this reminds me of being on the opposite stage to Robert at one of the live shows when he's like sort of selling out the Giga Theatre and I'm doing a talk on electric scooters on the Mega Theatre to my mum and sister because everyone else has gone to watch.
No, that's not true. That's not true. But anyway, no, but this is charging. Well, there's been a 43% increase in the number of public chargers since 2013 now. And it is, what are we now? There's 49,882 publicly accessible electric vehicle charging rapid chargers. So that's a lot.
It's huge. And I was looking at ZapMap yesterday. That's quite an overwhelming experience now.
Yeah.
When you go in, you see the whole of the UK and you're like, whoa!
Just a block of chargers.
Yeah.
There's no way you can go without a charger. It's like there should be one in your kitchen. You're like, oh, no.
And Melanie Shufflebottom, the stats that she produces each week, which are like, oh, look how many super duper duper fast chargers we've got in the UK. And you're like, wow. Yeah. Imagine, it's an unbelievable rate of change in the past decade.
And I went to a random Tesla supercharger the other day, and I can't remember where it was, on a motorway somewhere in the UK. And next to it was this whole range of, I think there was 16 green-coloured chargers I have never seen before. I've never heard of the company.
Ooh.
I don't know who they are. I can look it up if you want, because I took a picture of it and went, who are they? So I got the app. But the fact that they're there was, they just appeared, and there's not one or two. I think there were 16 of them. So it was a big 2 rows of them outside a Holiday Inn or what, a Premier.
Is there a better feeling than arriving at a service station that you've frequented many a time to find a bank of 16 new rapid chargers? I had that experience, I think, at Oxford Services the other day. Thank you, GridServe. They've got a really speedy ones.
They put more in, have they?
Well, so I don't know about Oxford Services, but I do know about the Redbridge Park and Ride, which we're very close to.
Oh, the Redbridge Park and Ride. I mean, that's on a different level.
It is on a totally different level. Partly, it's got a flow battery. That's great.
Yeah.
It's also got about 10,000 chargers. But it's got Fastned, Tesla, someone else who I can't remember. So they also sort of feel like they're competing for your attention. But it's great because if we're going to a shoot or whatever, I leave the house, do my makeup in the car whilst charging.
Of course.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. Jack, we've got to do our makeup.
That's what I do,
yeah. you perfect the hair.
I thin out and grey my hair to keep that. Sorry.
But I'm very proud of our Oxford Park.
No, that is amazing. And also it is linked to the big battery, isn't it, which I went to see.
Yes,
which we've not actually filmed, because I went to see it when they opened it. It's amazing. I can't remember how many megawatt hours. It's a hell of a lot.
It's chunky. Yeah, it's a chunky battery.
Yeah.
And I think, an amazing sort of collaborative project that definitely... There's a bunch of sort of city councils and county councils across the UK that have similar projects, but I think it's one that...
But they've also got to that point where you go, when you think back of when I first tried to find chargers for electric cars, and the council have put one in, and it's by the corner next to the toilets at the back of the town hall, which you can't find, which is dark at night, and every single possible mistake, they would do that. And this, finally, there's rapid chargers there that if you're on a journey, you can stop and charge there. But there's also hundreds of low-level chargers that if you're using a park and ride, what are you doing? You're parking a car, you're going into the town, you're shopping, you're coming back 4 or 5 hours later. You've added maybe 100, 120 miles to your car in that time, but with much less impact in every aspect. It's just a little pole, isn't it, in the ground?
Yeah.
And that's what we need in car parks.
more destination charging, man.
Yeah, man.
I don't want
Yeah.
to turn this into a big charging geek out, but you and I, we all talk about this all the time.
Absolutely.
One of the most satisfying charges is when you pop to a new supermarket and you're like, oh, bloody hell, they've got a little cheeky 50 kilowatt.
Yeah.
And by the time you come back from doing a shop, you've gained 15%. It's
Yeah.
And you didn't even think about it. You didn't even plan
And
it.
you weren't waiting. I mean, I think that's the critical thing, is that that's hard to understand. I was trying to explain that to people who've never driven an electric car, is imagine if you never had to stand and wait while your tank filled, that you plug the thing and you walk away and you do something else that's more interesting. And then you come back and you've added some gallons.
So we almost certainly have spoken about this on the podcast before, but when there's charges at the gym, that is great incentive to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And then you feel very smug.
Maybe
for-
to stay longer
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Get a couple of extra sets in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there on the third set of my bench presses, and the bar's bent so much because of the weight. And I think I can just get in. I'm going to get in. And I get a couple of add 10 miles to the range.
And then the gym could just slowly reduce the speed of the charges each time. You could even set it. You go, I just want 22 kilowatt charge.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to leave too early. I don't want the range to get home until I've done 2 hours of biceps.
And they're like 7 kilowatts for you, chum.
Yeah.
And then I've got to quickly do a quick gym story because it was eye-watering. I never saw her face, but there was a woman at the gym the other day who was doing squats with a barbell, and that's perfectly fine. It's good, but I have never seen, and it might be sexist, but I've never seen a woman with that heavier weight. Honestly, the bar, that's what it reminded me of. The bar, I swear, was bending. So she had the 20 kilogram thing, but loads of them. So it was like that, big blocks. And she was going, yeah. She only did like 3, but the fact that she was basically lifting up a car, I was impressed.
There you go.
I don't know where we go
Cut
from
that
there.
if we don't.
Yeah.
But I've never seen any human being lift that much weight. I mean, when it went back down, so she had boxes to put it on so that she didn't have to go right
Yeah.
down to the ground. The noise it made when it went, God, that is huge. Anyway,
She was actually a Marvel character.
I think she was a superhero, actually.
Cape hung up by the door.
Sorry, that is completely out of the. Yes. Have you got another? I've got another story. If you haven't.
Oh,
got it.
well, I can tell you what I've been up to.
Oh, good. Yes, please. Oh, thank you.
So, haven't seen so many cars recently, actually. Although, did see the Citroen Ami buggy.
Yes.
And did a wonderful job.
That was very nice.
Oh,
very
thank
cute.
you. Well, it was a lovely day out with cameraman Andy. It's a totally bizarre car because, frankly, who is it for? Who is buying them? And yet people are buying them. And I think it just sort of speaks to the fun that Citroen have as a brand. And that was really lovely. So, but haven't done so many vehicle-y type things. But we have spent a lot of time looking at space. I need to say this right. Space-based solar power.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, for those who aren't aware, this is literally what it says on the tin. It's putting solar panels in space and beaming that energy down to Earth.
Yeah.
So can I just quickly say, I know that you've been working on this project for a little while. I've not seen anything of the edit yet, but it sounds like
really good.
one of those things that like a naysayer car brand that wants to keep building ICE cars would suggest as a solution. They'd be like, look, space solar. We'll just do space solar and then we can keep on. Yeah. It sounds crazy.
Completely
and I
crazy.
cannot wait to hear about it.
Oh my God, okay, because there are so many bits of this that are just so fun. And actually the edit is extraordinary and our team have done a fabulous job. But, it literally came from science fiction. And it was
Was it
sort
Ray
of...
Kurzweil? Was it? I can't remember who
it was
first suggested it as
Asimov.
Asimov. Okay, yeah.
In a book called Reason. And that was proposed in, I think, 1951. And his idea literally was chuck a load of solar panels up in space, microwave the energy back to Earth, collect it on Earth. Which is ostensibly how communication satellites work.
Literally microwaves.
Microwave the energy.
Yeah.
What?
Which,
Wait, it gets better.
well, so then he did that in 1951. And then in 1976-ish, NASA were like, hang on a second. Oil crisis, not good. Space-based solar power in this book. That's quite a good idea. And they genuinely started to look into it. But the big challenge is you're building these enormous structures up in space, number one. Number two, when the cost of space missions it's all comes down to the cost of dollars per kilogram.
Yeah.
And actually, space travel has become that much cheaper, and so this has become much more viable. Equally, it's more viable to have autonomous robots building these very lightweight and super efficient solar panels. But I think the thing that still kind of blows my mind, I understand it in principle, is that you can convert DC current into a microwave, direct that beam to Earth and collect it, and then turn that back into electricity. And even though I know that energy,
What's the receiver like on Earth? What does it look like? And more importantly, if I stand on top of it with my leftover curry, will it be reheated?
Ooh, fantastic questions. So it has a fun name. It's you'd have a field of rectennas. Oh. Which isn't funny at all.
No.
Sorry.
Oh my God, there's a field of rectenners over there.
We had many serious conversations about rectenners, and I even actually spoke to someone from the European Space Agency, and I was like,
Tell me about your rectenna.
Please tell me that the space person at least vaguely understood that is funny, or were they just like, what are you giggling about?
Well, I had to do lots of but so he sadly did not find it quite so funny as I did. But this field of rectenners has to be absolutely enormous, because if you imagine that you've got this thing in space in geostationary orbit, so 36,000 kilometers above the Earth, you can direct the beam of microwaves, but it does spread out a little bit. So you're going to have this big field of rectenners to try and collect that signal. So for a 2 gigawatt plant, you would, like 2 nuclear plants worth of electricity, you'd be looking at a field 6.7 kilometers by 13 kilometers.
Okay.
It's quite
big. It's not impossibly big, right?
But it's big. And, when you think of that over the top of London, it's a big chunk of London, for example.
Yeah.
But then there's all sorts of ideas where you could co-locate that with offshore wind farms and all that kind of thing. You've already got grid connections. So...
Oh, could you do it for a floating version of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes,
But so there's all these things where actually economically it's kind of feasible, technologically it's kind of feasible. By 2042, we might have 15% of the UK's power from this form of energy. But the thing that, to my mind, makes it particularly controversial, or maybe it isn't, and maybe this is a naive interpretation on my behalf, is that a big compelling reason for the fact it's interesting is that you not only are beaming solar power, but you could shift where that power is going. So we could have some in the UK, and it might be that another country
needs it, and you shift it over. You send it to
good grief,
Belgium or France or somewhere, Italy.
Yeah, but then you've got this very centralized form of power, I think.
Yeah.
You have an enormous amount of control that you could exert over the world.
Oh, I see.
And actually, geostationary orbit, that doesn't belong to any particular country. And I think that's the thing that...
Right.
I think there is a huge ethical debate to be had there. But, when we started researching this, I thought it was a bit of a joke. It's not. It's like...
It's very, very... Well, it has been... Because I reported on a news episode recently that they, on a microscopically small level, Caltech basically charged a phone from solar power that they captured 36,000 kilometres up in the air. So it was a much smaller amount of electricity. It wasn't anything like we're talking about with that. But so it's been done. It's not like a theory. It has actually physically happened.
And to be honest, communication satellites basically do this already, but on like a really, really tiny scale, because you're not interested in the voltage, you're interested in the electrical signal. And I really think we're going to see it in all of our lifetime.
But I mean, the critical thing you haven't actually mentioned is they're always in the sun. I mean, that's the difference.
99% of the time.
Or 99% of the time they're in direct sunlight. So they're base load. That's what they are.
Yes, and that's the thing that gets everyone very excited. Yeah. But I think the other thing, I feel like I've given the whole video away, but whatever.
It's still worth watching because you do explain the difference between the various various waves.
Yeah, I want to start asking you about the sort of efficiency loss, but
brain
save
frying.
Some information for the video.
So, firstly, you asked about curry. Will it heat curry?
I did.
No.
Okay. That's probably a good thing.
It really
won't get
because it might also be
if they sort of miss with the beam, people aren't just going to just sort of combust or become very cooked through.
No, so it's very targeted, but at the center of that beam, so it's like most intense point. It's about a quarter of the intensity of the sun at the equator, so a bit warm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would feel some heat, but it wouldn't burn you or damage you.
So the European Space Agency man said to me, birds would quite like it.
Oh, right.
They'd be a bit warm.
Oh, okay.
Sounds quite pleasant.
Sounds quite pleasant. It sounds like there's also some thought that hopefully is
I
going
can't
on
wait
there.
to see this video.
Oh, thank
No,
you.
it is fascinating. I haven't seen right to the end, but I've seen most of it, and it's really it's very well put
At
together.
the end, there's a corker of a... There's not.
Ooh.
I'm sorry. But we've been looking at that. And then the other things that we've been looking at, lots of stuff on gas bans, alternative to boilers, all sorts of super interesting stuff. And then next week, we're seeing a very interesting, exciting EV startup.
Yeah. Oh, an EV startup. And the radiator. Yeah. I don't even know.
Yeah. So.
Oh, no, sorry. Next week we're seeing the EV startup. I do know what that is.
Yeah. And nice because it's in Oxfordshire.
Yeah, it's
and
not far.
they've got an exciting
Yeah.
business.
Was that next week? So when? Oh, yeah, next week.
Yeah, Wednesday. Tuesday.
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 I would just like to say to our listeners, you may think Robert's doing a comedic, like, I don't know what my schedule is next week. Bits there, our founder and leader, Robert Llewellyn.
I'm sorry.
That's real. That is real. Half the times.
There's no acting involved whatsoever.
I remember we were trying to book something. Oh, you drove the Model S Plaid recently, which
Yes.
maybe we'll talk about in a
Yeah.
second. And I was going back and forth with the Tesla PR team to arrange that
Yeah.
loan for you. And I said, Robert, they've got the car available on this date to this date. Are you free? And you said, I've never been freer than I am on those dates. And then someone else emailed me and said, Robert has 3 shoots during that period. Do not give him a Tesla Model S Plaid. Whatever you do, please don't do that.
But what I really enjoy is when I do stalk your calendar to see when we could potentially do shoots and arrange some things. I know when your bin day is. That's really good. I know when...
Never miss my bin day.
Never miss
It's the highlight of the week.
I see all sorts of interesting talks like the Skeptic Club. So I do feel a bit bad for calendar stalking.
No,
but
please do stalk away. No, it's very helpful. Yes. Generally, I do turn up on the right day at the right right-ish time.
Yeah.
But the Model S Plaid, I'll do a quick one of that because it was so unnecessary to do that review, but actually not. So the 2 things that happened were, one, where the Tesla service centre and sales thing in Tottenham in North London is they've got the first V4 superchargers. And you go, so what? Tesla, they're all in their own little walled garden of Apple superiority type, whatever. I can't remember the list of derogatory terms, except for these are built exactly so that any vehicle can use them. So they have much longer cable. So if your charge point isn't at the same place as a Tesla, you can still use it. They have touch to pay. So you don't even need the Tesla app, but if you get the Tesla app, it's cheaper because then and it's so automatic. So we use the Tesla app to charge the crew car, the VW ID4. Yeah. So you just drove it in, got the cable, plugged it in. I went blip on the app because it was number C3. So it got the number on the thing, and it charged it at like chunky,
quick.
180 kilowatts or something. It was just throwing it in there, shoveling it in.
They are just the best at chargers.
They all worked.
Yeah.
And so we used some other. So Reading Services in the UK on the M4 have a bank of them, and they're I didn't want to say the cost differential. They are kind of cheaper than anybody else at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for rapid charging.
So
you'd sort of think, oh, Tesla, they're going to charge through the roof. I don't know how they're doing it, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not the most expensive, and it's quite a challenge because of their reliability. I mean, they say it's 99.9% uptime. That's their aim, and they will immediately send 10 people out if there's a problem with a whole bank of chargers. Which has, he said, I did talk to them. He said it has happened that we've had chargers go down and there's none of them working. And we're there within an hour and we rip the whole thing apart and get them working because that's our aim. And I've only ever had one supercharger not work. I've plugged it in, it didn't do it straight away, and I had to move the car to the next bay and plug it in there. Once in, 8 years of using Tesla.
So I must just tell you this. There wasn't a Tesla supercharger, but it was a fast charger at a service station coming back from a shoot, and it was quite late at night. And rang the helpline because it wasn't working. And there's this incredible man that was like, who's obviously typing away, changing all the code or whatever. But because it was one of those sort of quite tall, quite narrow ones, in my head, I was like, it feels like the man is inside that machine. And I said this to him on the phone. He was like, oh, tell your colleague I am. He was so good. And anyway,
Did he make it work though?
he did make it work.
Good. Oh,
It was incredible. He reset it, and it was such a. I was like, this is
good
what
we need.
Service. Yeah, it's amazing.
But anyway, the silly car is ridiculous, and it was difficult. So we did try. Cameraman Louis has some amusing footage on his phone because he was sitting in the passenger seat when I first tried it out. Sort of just absolutely launch it like they tell you to. And the phone smacked him in the face. I think it hurt quite a bit. So, but that was on a really wet road, and you can't feel it. I did feel it slip a bit, but it so brilliantly corrects itself. Yeah. But it clearly reduced the acceleration. But by the time we filmed it, the road had dried. And it is interesting to compare it to where the last one I drove that really freaked me out was the ludicrous mode, and that made me scream and want my mum. But this one, I am more used to it.
Yeah,
I've got hardened to it, and it's so weird. But it's still. It's not the 0 to kind of 20 miles an hour bit on the way that launches is not that impressive because it's completely designed not to spin the wheels. So it's still incredible, but it's not bonkers. It's from when you're doing 20 to name your speed. Yeah, it's terrifying.
I had that car for a few days as well, and it's. Without incriminating myself, it's what happens when you're doing motorway speed and then floor it. It's absolutely
it's
relentless and utterly pointless.
Yes,
of course.
Completely pointless.
It's one of those cars that feels dissatisfied doing any kind of legal speed. When you're doing 70, you can feel the car going, oh, come on! Which is, it's a dangerous thing, having a car that goads you. To be faster, but remarkable car. That's a fun episode as well. I'm looking forward to that one.
No, and also, I mean, I think the thing I didn't really say or didn't go on about, but I had one of the really early Model S's, and it was the interior. I think it was justifiable to be a bit snooty about the quality of the interior if you think of how much that car cost. It was a rude word. It was not good. The interior of the one I drove then is like a luxury vehicle that you'd expect. It's like a BMW or a posh Audi or a Mercedes. It's beautifully put together. So they've really tuned, but it's the software and it's 1,000 horsepower, over 1,000 horsepower, 3 motors. It is completely bonkers.
And for me, the big problem with the S and the X is that the 3 and the Y are so flipping good.
Yeah.
It's like 80% of the car for less than half the price.
Less than half the price.
There's the S and the X aren't on sale in
No,
UK,
you can't buy it
will
in
not
UK,
be for the foreseeable future. Maybe never again.
I don't think they will.
But I think they had their moment in time, and they had the desired effect of drawing attention towards Tesla and showing electric cars can be things other than sort of sardine tins of depression. They're remarkable vehicles. They truly are. I was thinking of
sardine tin of depression.
I was specifically imagining your iMeave that you used to have when I said that.
Yeah. Although I quite like that. I wasn't depressed.
Yeah,
it was funny.
It wasn't a sardine tin of depression.
A Norwegian guy once told me they're very good drift missiles in the snow as well.
Oh, they are amazing in the snow.
Scandinavia, they just drive them sideways everywhere when it snows.
Oh, they would be able to. I mean, I drove that mine in the snow because it's rear-wheel drive. And I guess it's got quite a lot of weight at the back with it. I don't even know, but I could not believe. So I had a Prius and an iMeave, and I tried to get the Prius out of the garage when we'd had proper snow, and I dug it out, but there was still snow there. And the Prius went, and as soon as the tyres hit the snow, they had a meeting. I've always said this. They had a meeting, decided they were Core 8, and there's no way they're going out on that. So it sort of went, and nothing. And I pressed nothing. I pressed the foot hard down on the throttle. Nothing. There was no noise. There was just went. And I got in the iMeave, and it just. The steering was so. There's a man in our village called Jim who he drove a Land Rover past our house.
I feel I've heard a lot about Jim over the years.
Jim's amazing. He's a legend in the village, and so he'd got Land Rover ruts, the only car that had been down. So I went over the bumps and then fell into the ruts, and then went, oh good, I can keep up with Jim. But I wanted to go to the shop, which is that way, and he was driving into the village down that way. So I was steering forwards, and it went like that. It just turned.
Jim, please.
It was rails.
Jim,
I just followed Jim. There's nothing I could do. Wouldn't go. I couldn't get it to go. The wheel hard over, and it just went straight forward without any trouble at all. So I went to Jim's house and had tea.
Hey, there you go. All worked out. Can I say some stuff about a thing?
Yes, please.
I'd like to pitch a video to you both, and you tell me if this is worth doing.
Okay.
This is inspired by a couple of cars that I've filmed with recently, and then also a few comments that we've received on videos. Euro NCAP. Is Euro NCAP ruining cars? Now, here's 2 reasons why I'm interested in investigating this topic.
Yeah.
Number 1, as we all know, lane assist, the single most irritating thing about modern cars.
Yeah.
Every modern car with a 5-star Euro NCAP rating has that feature.
to have it.
Because you have to have that feature to get a 5-star rating. But in
so
almost
annoying.
every car, it's so poorly executed that you only notice it when the wheel's being wrenched out of your hands on a country road in a dangerous fashion.
Yeah.
And actually, I've gotten to the point where in car reviews, I'm specifically praising cars that make it easy to turn off.
Yeah.
So the Jeep Avenger, it's one button right there to turn off the lane assist.
Yeah.
And that's celebrated because it's such an
so
annoying
easy to do.
feature. The VW ID car's infernal because it turns on every single time you start the car.
Yeah.
And you've got to go into a menu, into a menu, into a menu. It's a nightmare.
MG4 drives me. I came in
MG4.
it today, drove me, it caught me out. I always forget to do it.
Yeah, and-
catches me out the same place. Oh, get me back.
I've spoken to MG about that, and part of the reason for it is that the people that made that car are based in China and hadn't been to the UK and hadn't driven one on UK roads.
what our roads are like.
Something that the MG UK PR team have genuinely done is flown out some bigwigs from China and gone, right, go down
That's
this
a road.
country B road and tell me what you think. And then go
No.
back and fix it. So I think they're working on
good.
it.
It would be very good to have.
But that's one thing.
Yeah.
The reason that feature exists is because you need it for a Euro NCAP
Right.
5-star rating. Another thing that really caught my attention the other day is at the aforementioned Citroen EC3 launch.
Yeah.
We did some roundtables with some of the engineers. And naturally, all the journos were pressing with the same question. Come on, how have you made it so cheap? How have you done this? How have you done this? And after a lot of squeezing, one engineer muttered something under their breath along the lines of, we're not focusing too much on Euro NCAP.
Wow.
Which is to say, I anticipate this car is not going to have a 5-star safety rating. Now, that doesn't mean it's got no crash structures and it's going to, collapse in on itself if you bump into a lamppost.
Yeah.
It just might not have certain sort of intelligent features that mean it's not going to beep at you so much. But you need those features for that 5-star rating.
Yeah.
Now, if that's one of the key reasons that they've been able to hit this price point, is it time to reassess the criteria?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will just look at a car and go, oh, it's got 3 stars. I'm not putting my kids in that.
Yeah.
There's a famous story about the VW Up, which was a 5-star safety rated car.
Right.
And then the Euro NCAP rules changed. And overnight,
That's right.
it became a
It became a-
2 or 3
Yes,
star
I forgot
rated
about that.
car.
Yeah,
the car didn't change.
No.
It didn't become more dangerous. Just the criteria was raised. You had
Yeah.
to have all these extra clever features, which if they had added them, would have made the car more expensive.
Yeah.
So that's my elevator pitch. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's really. I think just quickly before I forget, I think the fact that so many people communicate with each other and talk about the fact that they turn off lane assist really says everything. You can't drive. The car is undrivable. It drives you insane.
Ironically,
MG4
it's dangerous. in
Everything
some
about the
cars.
MG4 I absolutely love. It's such a good car to drive as long as you've turned off lane assist. And if you haven't, it's a pain.
Well, I think it would be so interesting to kind of understand. Sorry, excuse me.
Sorry. Now we hear her real speaking voice. Yeah, no, I reckon, to be fair, I reckon,
Great. She goes, excuse me one minute. Anyway, I said to him, watch it, sunshine. That's what I want.
That's just my weekend voice. No, but I think what would be so fascinating is to really understand that process, because I don't really understand it.
No, me neither.
And it would be so incredible to understand what is sort of structurally constitutes safety. So, for example, crash structures, all that sort of stuff. And then what comes from advanced driver assist or ADAS sorts of systems. And within either of those categories, what's really core and fundamental to the design of a car versus a tick list of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if I worked for NCAP, the thing I think I would want to add is that with all of these features, how safe is it to turn them off whilst driving? For example, if it's one button, fantastic. That's quite a safe maneuver to do. If you're having to go into sort of three different
menus, I have to in the MG, yeah.
That makes it even more dangerous. So I think it'd be wicked to understand what actually is that process. What does it mean? So
it's also what lobbying took place with them from, because there will have been some from manufacturers, but there will have been some from electronics companies. I don't want to pick out Bosch as an example, but Bosch do supply an enormous amount of components to an enormous range of vehicles. Did they lobby to have that so that you therefore have those things? I mean, I actually probably don't think that is the case. I don't think it's like the fossil fuel lobby. But, you wonder what influences come into the committee or the group that decides these things. And they must. I'm sure they test drive them. I'm sure they have data on how many crashes there are, what the fatality rates are, because they've all gone down so remarkably in the last, say, 20 years. The amount of road fatalities of passengers in cars. I think pedestrian fatalities have actually gone up, which is slightly.
Oh, yeah, especially in the US as well.
Yeah, in the US,
yeah.
that's where I saw that figure. I don't think that is in Europe, actually. I'm not sure.
Is that right?
Yeah, yes. I don't quite know why. I think, a lot of it is to do with you don't see the people because the car you're driving is bigger than a house.
Well, there is that. Yeah, that's genuinely probably
Well, I mean,
part of the
certainly
reason.
children have been killed by their own parents by driving
Oh,
massive.
God,
I mean, it's
that's
just such an appalling idea.
I have just remembered as we've been talking. I used to work with this man called Richard Colley, who there is not a single thing that man doesn't know about the safety of vehicles and all of the legislation. So he would be a fabulous
good.
podcast guest
Absolutely.
for advice of this. So
100%.
Rich Colley, if you're listening,
All right.
expect an email.
Expect an email very soon. Do you think we should move on to Toyota?
I've got so many battery things to say.
Oh, good. So, let's go. Well, the reason then is that Toyota have announced that they are going to mass produce solid state batteries for their vehicles, which are coming in like 2028, 6. Not that soon. Yeah.
Not that soon. So, really interestingly, well, depending on who you are, I think it's very interesting.
We all think it's very
We all think it's very interesting. We did, we filmed an episode yesterday looking at the top 6 or 7 next big battery breakthroughs.
Right.
And solid state's so interesting because it's sort of heralded as this big battery utopia. Super energy dense, really fast charging times. The fact that you haven't got a liquid electrolyte means you can squish all of that energy into a much smaller space. But it's really tricky to make. And obviously lots of companies have made loads of progress. There's various kind of hybrid solid state batteries already in use. I think Neo ET7 should have that before Toyota, actually. Right. But what I think is more interesting is that there's a load of other stuff that arguably you get really, really substantial gains in energy density, but are just less complicated. Right. So the big one being silicon anodes. There's probably, 10 or so companies that are really, really far forward with pushing that. So huge amounts of energy density by just adding in a bit of silicon to your graphite on the anode side. And the difficulty that they have is that silicon, can hold much more lithium, so it can hold much more charge, but silicon expands. It has a bit of a kind of Violet Beauregard, Willy Wonka moment when you're charging.
Good reference.
Oh, thanks very much. But that's close, and we should see that in vehicles from about 2025. And then the other one that's kind of even more possible, and I think actually is already in production, is LMFP. So has all the benefits of LFP, lithium iron phosphate. Right. So cheaper, but really good thermal
is it lithium manganese?
Yeah.
Right.
And
so I have heard about that.
So this smattering of manganese suddenly does these amazingly weird and wonderful things to your energy density. So suddenly you have LFP, cheap, thermally stable, really great. Throw in some manganese, it becomes even better and super comparable to NMC, if not better. Right. So I don't know. I think solid states, I feel that it is amazing, obviously, and it is sort of this slight battery utopia, but there's a ton of other stuff that I think is going to get us a big chunk of the way there.
It sort of sounds good and it grabs headlines, and I think everyone's excited for this idea of a new technology that comes in and then overnight batteries become half the weight or size or twice the power density. But actually, it's just going to be incremental with little clever adjustments. I've driven some sort of facelifted versions of EVs that have existed for a while now, and across the board they'll be 20% more efficient. The motor's clever. It's happening.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the other really cool thing is that obviously batteries are great and you can make them more energy dense, fantastic. But exactly as you say, better, more efficient motors, better inverters, lighter vehicles, all that more efficient vehicles, and then chuck that all together, and of course you're going to get substantially better ranges.
Yeah.
So.
And I think one of the things that I'm sure you cover this, but one of the aspects that caught my eye when I read a bit of the background to the Toyota announcement was that the two things that a lot of engineers are concerned about is the cost anyway, which you could imagine if there's any company that could bring the manufacturing cost down, it's probably Toyota because they're so big and they've got so much experience in that. So it might be a little bit more expensive to start with, but they'll get cheaper. But the other one is recycling. They're incredibly difficult to break down and recycle solid-state batteries, whereas we've now kind of essentially got over that hurdle with the batteries we use now with lithium ion and lithium. We can extract all those materials. I say we. I mean clever people who we admire can do that.
I would flag at this juncture that we've done a fair share of Toyota bashing on this channel, and rightly so, given some of their previous indiscretions when it comes to electric vehicles. But actually, we are just really happy to see this gigantic, powerful automotive brand seemingly now going at it with gusto, really putting their back into electrification, because their resource and astonishing
market
levels of experience that they can really make a difference.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic newsletter called Bloomberg Hyperdrive. It's a daily newsletter.
Oh, I don't know that one. Because I get a lot of Bloomberg NEF stuff.
Yeah. Well, this one is a little bit more digestible. You'd really enjoy it as well. And it is, they're like 2 minutes to read every day. But today there was an interview with the CEO of Toyota that Craig Trudell did, and there's a lot of humility in that interview from Toyota.
Right.
It's worth reading.
Oh,
it's a real kind of like, we're working on it.
Yeah.
Which I
the
respect.
fact that NIO have got probably a car in production now, as in loads of them with solid state batteries, maybe slightly different chemical formula but the fact that that's happened in a Chinese company, because I also reported on, and now a BYD Dolphin is for sale in Japan. So this is a Chinese manufactured car that's for sale in the home of Nissan, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Honda. Like, it would always have been the other way. In the last 50 years, those cars would have gone from Japan into China, and now and apparently it is selling very well.
Yeah,
because it was the world's #1 car exporter and has now lost that position.
Japan has, oh, big time, yeah. So these things. I mean, that's one of the kind of key arguments I keep making, is that there isn't such a thing as an electric car, because by the time you've said car, it's changed. This technology is in such flux. It's moving so fast. It's developing so fast that in 5 years' time, the ones that we've got now, or that are 5 years old, will be nice second-hand old bangers. They're still going, but the new one is that one does 1,000 miles on a charge that takes 1 minute. No, it's silly, but
Well, I don't think it is.
Well, it
isn't
silly.
silly.
No.
That's the thing. Yeah, and that was one of the questions we asked in this battery episode we filmed yesterday. Is an 1,000-mile battery possible? And how crazy, if you'd been asking that question in 2012 in your talk, you'd be like, probably not.
No.
Maybe 200?
Who needs 1,000?
I've used this analogy a million times, but I really feel like when it comes to battery tech, we're in the era of the early mobile phones that you had to drag behind you on a suitcase handle. Back when the mobile phone first came out, and it was like a suitcase. People were like, this is the cutting edge. This will never, nothing will ever be more modern than this technology. 20 years from now, we're going to look back at the 800-kilo battery under the floor of the Tesla Model S, and we're going to laugh at how enormous and wasteful it was.
Yes.
Because that's what happens.
And also you go, I live in a terraced house, where can I charge my car? Well, I do this. You pull out the battery, it's that long, it's that wide, and it weighs 2 kilos, and that's 100 kilowatt hours. It's that stuff is when the whole thing. But it was, I've just got to quickly say, because I'm old enough, that my friend Michael called me on his car phone, I think it was called. It was in his car. And the cost to me as a landline owner was £4. So when he called me, it cost him 10, and it cost me 4. So it came on, and we saw it on our bill. I went, oh my God, look at that, £4. I mean, our monthly phone bill at the time was like 12 quid. So £4 was like, absolutely chaotic. And that's how, and also he said, I've just run over an old lady. That's what he said. I've just run over an old lady. I went, what? Where are you? I'm in my car. He was American. He's from New York.
Simpler times. Bring back car phones with cords.
It just had a cord.
Yeah.
You had to dial it with buttons. It had buttons though.
See, but I had this thought the other day, because I drive a Model Y.
I just want to say, my friend hadn't run over an old lady, so I
good.
just thought I'd check it. It was a joke.
For libel reasons, would you like to confirm?
But I, made a call, and I was like, it is remarkable that you can do that. And I remember having one of those in the first car I had, that tape that you put through the tape thing, and then it had a
So it was like a cassette
Yeah.
a tape cassette that you would put in the cassette player.
And then this little wire that came out, and then you had an MP3 player that had 4 songs on it.
Yeah.
And that's it's
Well,
wild.
yes, the fact that that's in your life, because I do remember that, but the fact that that's in your lifetime. Because I remember seeing a car. I never went in it, but we saw a car where you could put a single, a vinyl record, a single in a slot, and it had a ball bearing that would click down in the middle of the hole. Then it would spin down. Then a needle came down and it would play. Apparently, it was a thing. Yeah, it was at a car show, and it was like you could have a box of singles, and you could just play a different single.
My God!
But that was when I was a kid. That was a proper long time ago.
That is incredible.
There's one last thing I just want to mention, which is trucks, because I saw a big electric truck the other day in London. I went, that is electric. Waitrose, delivering to Waitrose, big, articulated, pure electric truck. But I've just seen this report about a truck stop that is being built now on the Dutch-German border, which will have, I think it's 16 1 megawatt chargers for trucks. So they are built to deliver a megawatt.
Good Lord.
And the boss of MAN, because I think of it as MAN Diesel, MAN Trucks, MAN Trucks in Germany, has said we need 4,000 1 megawatt chargers to run our commercial truck fleet in Germany. Just
the speed of the charger is 1 megawatt.
1 megawatt,
and that's the trucks can charge that.
Trucks charge at that. I mean, I think the Tesla semis, when they charge, they have 1 megawatt connectors.
That, like, in my head, that requires a cable that's like
so big,
the size of a dinner plate. That's like whoop.
No, they're quite light. I think they are heavier than, but they're not like massive.
I've got a really fun fact for you.
Oh, good.
I can't believe I've not told you this already. So we may or may not have got a date to drive an electric lorry at what am I trying to say?
Millbrook.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
For you.
Oh.
Yeah. Ooh. So you get a day just driving trucks round the track.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
I drive trucks.
You can come.
Okay. Yeah. We've all got to go. I think everyone should go.
Fantastic. That's really exciting.
Well, also, because I've only driven trucks ever in that sort of environment, and I don't want to drive one on the road because it's too scary. But when you're in somewhere where you know that it's sort of catering and it's big, and it's a huge thing, and you're going, oh my God, I don't know how to do this, then it's more fun.
Yeah.
If you had to actually steer through a small English village in a 38-ton truck, I think that's a bit stressful.
I mean, I would watch that video, Robert, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Tesco delivery people that, you see down like these narrow streets where I live, it gives me anxiety.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
just in the delivery vans.
Yeah.
The trucks,
and they're like little. But,
But I just thought that was an interesting, I think that side of, we often don't cover that so much, the side of the changes that are happening in the commercial fleet, so buses, trucks, delivery vans, is really quick again, because then it's people who run fleets do spreadsheets and they go, well, they've all cost us this much, and this is how much we spent on fuel. Oh, look, this is £250,000 a month cheaper to run this fleet.
And of course, fleets are where we can have a huge impact very quickly, which is to say, if a large company decides to electrify their 1,000 van fleet, that's 1,000 huge diesel vans off the road. Yeah. And incidentally, the big stuff, the big articulated lorries and airplanes, that's always the stuff that we've said the battery tech isn't quite there yet. That's sort of the last frontier. And that's where we've seen some really clever innovation in terms of battery swapping. Like the Janus trucks that we visited in Australia. Yeah. But all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, no, we can just do that with charging because we've gotten really good at it very quickly. Yeah. Remarkable.
But I think the other thing that's so interesting from a kind of logistics perspective is that, okay, sure, the battery technology has got there, which is remarkable. But also the people with the spreadsheets, they so understand the routes that people are doing, the amounts of breaks that people have to have, how long they're having those breaks. And that, to me, sort of says that you could have a way more strategic deployment of charging infrastructure that suits those specific vehicles, those specific routes. In London, it's something crazy like a delivery van, so obviously not a lorry, but a delivery van does 30 miles
it's nothing,
a day.
Yeah.
It's nothing, and I think that kind of granularity of how you could create this just very efficient ecosystem is super cool.
And I did have a lovely positive, one of those potentially negative comment streams on YouTube because it was so sweet. And it said, I do regularly drive 700 miles in the UK from southeast of England to northwest Scotland. and I can do that easily on one tank of diesel. And I went, oh, that's fantastic. I'm really impressed. I'm concerned for your bladder. Do you ever stop? And he went, oh, and he said, I'm 70. I stop all the time.
Yeah.
So I said, well, you could plug a car. And he went, good thought. So it was a very positive, but it was just that idea that you can drive 700 miles on one tank.
700 miles.
Yeah. You can.
10 hours of motorway.
Yes.
Non-stop.
Well, it takes him 14 hours, I think he said. He can do it in a day or 12 hours, but he's stopping because he has to. He's 70, poor fella. He's got to have a Jimmy Riddle, as we call it.
Can I tell you about a book that I've read that I think you'll really enjoy? It's honestly, this was one of the most beautiful books I've read in probably this year. It's called Dreamland by Rosa Rankin G. I'm not sure how you say that out loud. And it imagines this very near-term dystopic future in which we've got two issues sort of meeting at a crossroads. One, climate in the UK, rising sea levels and rising temperatures, and the housing crisis.
Right.
And it imagines this sort of climate dystopic future in Margate in the UK. And
she's a seaside town, we should say, for people around the world.
And it is honestly a really, really beautiful book that explores the impacts of climate change in a beautiful way.
Wow.
And it's a little bit saucy. So, something
it?
there for everyone.
Well,
but highly recommend.
I've got to mention, if we're going to do books, we should, because I've got to mention Ed Conway's book, Material World, which I've just done a podcast with him. He's such an extraordinary man, journalist, but with enormous technological background and knowledge, and went all around the world. So jealous of where he's been, all over the place, to the biggest mines and the deepest quarries and all those things. It's just fascinating. And the history of them. So it's the basic materials we use: salt, silicon, so sand. So it's salt, sand, iron, I think, are the first three chapters. And what's happened in the history with salt is unbelievable. I mean, you kind of half knew that there would have been a time when there was a pack animal with a load of salt on it being walked from Mongolia to Venice, whatever. But salt was such people had wars over salt.
But that's where the term salary comes from.
Oh, that's right. I did know that, but I've totally forgotten.
Yeah.
Good fact.
But that book is so jam-packed with those facts.
Yeah.
Because they used to pay people in salt.
I'm going to get all of the facts wrong.
Worth your salt.
Worth your
Thank you.
salt.
Thank you for Chris. Cameraman Chris. He's worth his salt.
Get him on QI.
On a good day, he's worth his salt. On a bad day, he's worth some sugar.
But that book, the other thing that you so I actually have it on audiobook. And the way he describes being
Ed's book, have you got?
Yeah.
Right. And he reads it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way that he describes being in the steelworks in Port Talbot in Wales.
Yes, Port Talbot Steelworks.
He takes you into that
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
And there's so many interesting facts about, things like, you have to get steel from or iron from old shipwrecks for medical grade steel. Things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really good.
No, it's very interesting. Yeah. And Helen, I think we should always give Helen a plug, because Blue Machine, beautiful. I've nearly finished it.
I've not started it yet.
So
it's on my
beautiful.
list.
It's just beautifully written. I kind of hate her because she's it's such a beautifully written book, and she's properly, genuinely, really clever.
Yeah.
You want a bit of, something.
I'm summoning the courage to do a wind up next time I see her, where I claim to be an ocean denier. You go, I see, you believe in those, do you?
I've never seen one.
Giant bodies of water, is it? That control the weather, do they? Yeah, pull the other one. Helen. Lovely lady.
Yeah,
Can't wait
she's
to read the
amazing.
book.
No, it's good. It is
Wait.
good. It
She
is good.
almost made me cry. I interviewed her at the Amsterdam live show last year,
Right.
and she started talking about oceans, and she almost
It's
made me
just
cry.
stunning,
She
isn't
is
it?
so inspiring when she
Yeah.
gets talking about her specialist subject.
She's unbelievable. And in after the live show in Vancouver, we actually went whale watching, and there was an incredible tour guide who was so knowledgeable and had so many facts.
But were you with Helen?
No, but
right.
I almost wanted to be like, hey, I know Helen Chertsky. Have you read? And I felt very proud that she's part of our fully charged
Yeah, I know.
family.
We're very honoured to have her. She is amazing and so enthusiastic, and yeah. Anyway, on that note, I think we've gone well over
That's
time.
surely quite enough of that.
I know, but it's been fun.
I
I'm
know.
afraid I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So can we do this every week? We could go to each other's kitchens. We don't have to go to
that'd be
stick to
nice.
one kitchen all the time. But it's been very nice. Kitchen. This is about our own fully charged kitchen, confidential. No, it wasn't very confidential.
We could work on that though.
Could we have like food pairings for each?
Do food pairings.
Everyone brings a snack. Like a class tea. Do you have class tea in your primary school?
Yeah, and
All
I got to
the parents
say,
had to bake cakes. And
if someone brought mini rolls,
cop out. That's
Cop
a
out,
total
total
cop out. I mean,
cop
don't,
right, I
don't
quite
get
like
me wrong. Love a mini roll.
I love a mini roll.
I do not like a mini
do
roll.
not. I mean, I probably have a mini roll a year maximum, if that. But
Keep the cameras rolling. Imogen doesn't like mini rolls. I mean, to have it out here and
how
now.
can you not like mini rolls? They're the best.
No, everything about it. It's not enough thick enough chocolate. It's a too light sponge.
Oh, I
not
like
into
that.
it.
I like its lightness and its fakeness and its massive amounts of sugar that's been pumped into it.
Cameraman Chris is actually licking his lips off.
Cameraman Will's with you. Does it
3-2.
like-
Yeah.
3-2 mini
3-2.
rolls. And on that bombshell.
Let us say, if you have been, thank you for watching / listening.